Dear learners, welcome back to WSE Legendary Lives, where learning English opens the doors to ancient wisdom and timeless tales. Let your imagination awaken. Today, we journey into a myth so powerful, it has thundered through centuries. The name is known far and wide, across languages and cultures. It is whispered in temples, shouted in battles, and written in the stars. Hercules. To some, he is the strongest man who ever lived. To others, a symbol of unstoppable will. But behind the muscles and mighty deeds lies a man who suffered, struggled, and searched for meaning, a man whose true story is one of loss, guilt, and redemption. This is not just the tale of a hero who lifted mountains or fought monsters. It is the journey of a soul tested by fate, tormented by madness, and driven by the hope of becoming something greater than his pain. This myth is not fantasy, it is a mirror. A reflection of our deepest fears, hidden strengths, and eternal longing for purpose. As we follow Hercules through 12 impossible labors, we will explore the emotions behind his battles, and the transformation behind each test. You'll not only improve your English, you'll connect with something older than history itself. If you'd like to support this journey, you can click the thanks button, or tap join to explore 3 levels of exclusive member perks. Every bit of support helps us keep creating meaningful content for you. So take a breath. Open your heart. And step into the fire-forged path of a hero. Let the legend begin. Long before the 12 labors, long before his name echoed through amphitheaters and scrolls, Hercules was born into a world of jealousy, prophecy, and divine schemes. His name in Greek was Heracles, glory of Hera. But it was a bitter irony. For Hera, queen of the gods, would be his greatest enemy. Hercules was the son of Zeus, the thunder-wielding king of Olympus, and a mortal woman named Alcmene. Their union was not one of peace, but of deception. Zeus disguised himself as Alcmene's husband while he was away, tricking her into conceiving a child with divine strength. When Hera discovered the betrayal, her rage was not aimed at Zeus, but at the innocent child who bore his blood. Before Hercules could even speak, Hera sent 2 serpents into his cradle to kill him. But the infant did not scream, he reached out with tiny fists and strangled them both. Even then, destiny stirred in his veins. Hercules was born into a world where gods walked among men, but their presence did not guarantee protection or love. In fact, the gods could be cruel, unpredictable, and deeply human in their flaws. And so Hercules' life would be shaped not only by strength, but by divine punishment, a punishment that would one day drive him to madness. His early years were spent in training, music, wrestling, chariot racing, archery. He grew tall and strong, faster than any other. But beneath his power was a boy who longed to belong, torn between mortal tenderness and immortal fire. He married young, trying to live a peaceful life with his wife, Megara, and their children. For a while, the world was quiet. But gods do not forget, and Hera's vengeance only slept. In Greek culture, heroes were more than warriors. They were symbols of fate, of resistance, of the struggle between free will and the will of the gods. Hercules would become the greatest of these symbols. Not because he was flawless, but because he fell. And what mattered most was how he rose again. The story of Heracles comes from a world where myth and meaning were tightly woven. Every monster he would fight, every labor he would endure, was more than a physical task, it was a moral test, a metaphor for the struggles inside us all. That is why his legend still speaks today, because beneath the divine drama, we see something human. Something fragile. Something true. And Hera? she was not done yet. She would soon strike a blow so deep, it would break him completely. But even the strongest must break before they are rebuilt. What happened next would shatter the man, and give birth to the myth. The gods, they say, can touch a man without leaving a mark, and yet, his soul may never be whole again. For Hercules, the cruelty did not come in the form of swords or beasts, but from within his own mind. Hera, ever watchful, waited for the moment when his life seemed most peaceful, when he had a home, a wife, and children gathered around the fire. That was when she struck. She did not send monsters. She sent madness. In a moment that would haunt Hercules forever, his vision twisted. The faces of his loved ones blurred into illusions. Driven by divine madness, he mistook his own family for enemies. In a blind rage, he took up his weapons and did what no man, no god, could ever undo. When he awoke from the fog of madness, silence surrounded him. Cold, heavy, unbearable. His children lay still. His wife was gone. And he, the mighty Hercules, fell to his knees. He did not scream. He did not fight. He simply collapsed under the weight of what he had done. For all his strength, he could not lift the burden of guilt. This was the first true imbalance. Not the serpent in the cradle. Not the taunts of jealous gods. But the unbearable awareness that his strength had become a curse, that the very hands that could lift the sky had also destroyed what he loved most. Hercules could have vanished then, disappeared into the forests or thrown himself into the sea. But there was something inside him, a voice, faint yet steady, that whispered, redemption. He went to the oracle of Delphi, seeking not forgiveness, but punishment. He wanted to suffer. To pay. To balance the unbalance that tore at his soul. And the oracle, guided by Apollo, gave him an answer. He was to serve a king, not as a warrior, but as a servant. For 12 years, he would obey. And not just obey, he would endure 12 impossible tasks, labors so brutal, so unforgiving, that no man could survive them all. Only then would he find atonement. The king he was sent to serve was Eurystheus, a small man in power, petty and trembling at the sight of Hercules' strength. Jealous of the demigod before him, he set out to break him, not build him. Each labor he gave was designed not as a path to redemption, but as a path to ruin. But Eurystheus underestimated one thing, Hercules' pain. For what is pain, when a man has already lost everything? What is death, when you've already walked through hell? From this point on, Hercules was no longer just a strong man. He was a soul on a journey, not of conquest, but of purification. The labors ahead were not just trials of body, but of spirit. And as he took his first steps toward the unknown, eyes lowered, heart heavy, something began to change. Not outside, but within. And so, with guilt as his companion and silence as his guide, Hercules walked into the first of 12 trials. But no one, not even the gods, could predict what he would become. There are moments when a man is not defined by who he is, but by what he endures. With each labor, Hercules stepped deeper into a world where strength alone could not save him. These were no ordinary tasks. They were punishments dressed as quests, carefully chosen by King Eurystheus to humiliate, break, and destroy. But the gods, as ever, play strange games. What was meant to ruin Hercules would, in time, remake him. The first test sent him to Nemea, to slay a monstrous lion that terrorized the hills. No sword could cut its golden fur. No arrow could pierce its hide. But Hercules did not rely on weapons. He tracked the lion to its dark cave, blocked one exit, and fought it with his bare hands, wrestling the beast until its breath stopped. When he emerged, his face was marked with sweat and blood, but his eyes burned with focus. He skinned the lion with its own claw and wore its pelt like armor. This was not pride, it was memory. A reminder that nothing would come easily. Next came the Hydra of Lerna, a serpent with many heads, and for each head cut, 2 more would grow. But Hercules learned to ask for help. His nephew Iolaus came with him, and together they burned each neck to prevent regrowth. This labor taught him something the gods never did, that wisdom and companionship are strengths greater than rage. One task after another dragged him across the wild edges of Greece. He captured the golden-horned Ceryneian hind without shedding blood, showing restraint instead of fury. He wrestled the Erymanthian boar, not to kill it, but to bring it back alive. He cleaned the stables of King Augeas in a single day, not through brute force, but by rerouting rivers. At times, the labors seemed ridiculous. Fetching birds? Herding cattle? But each one chipped away at something deep inside him, not his pride, but his pain. Slowly, he began to replace guilt with purpose. Not because he forgot the past, but because he was carrying it forward, transforming it into something that might one day resemble peace. And yet, these labors were more than physical acts. They were symbols. The lion, fear that cannot be wounded. The Hydra, anger that multiplies when attacked. The stables, shame that must be cleansed not with violence, but with clarity. Through it all, Hercules changed. He grew quieter. More deliberate. The world began to see him not just as a destroyer, but as a figure of strange dignity. A man who met darkness with resolve, who suffered without bitterness. Still, something stirred beneath the surface. A question he did not speak aloud. Was redemption truly possible? Or was he only becoming a legend to escape being a man? And then came a moment, brief, fragile, but real, when he saw a mother shielding her child from danger, and instead of reaching for his club, he opened his hands. Not every victory is won with strength. Some are won with surrender. But these were only the first steps. Beyond the horizon waited trials that would test not just his body or mind, but his soul itself. For the turning point was coming. And it would demand more than courage. The further Hercules traveled, the more the labors grew strange, as if the world itself was testing not just his body, but the core of his being. He had passed through forests thick with monsters, crossed lands haunted by curses, and yet, his most dangerous trial would come not from beasts, but from the burden of memory. The 8th labor sent him to Thrace, to steal the man-eating mares of King Diomedes. These were no ordinary horses. They had tasted human flesh and gone mad. Their master fed them strangers, a king more monstrous than any creature Hercules had faced. The hero stormed the stables, fought off the guards, and captured the horses, but when he returned to face Diomedes, something shifted. He saw himself in the tyrant's face, a man feeding violence, creating monsters, blinded by his own power. In a moment of cold justice, Hercules turned the horses on their master. Diomedes was devoured by his own beasts. This act was not celebrated. It was whispered about. Was it justice, or revenge? Hercules did not answer. But that night, he stood alone by the sea, eyes wide open to the wind, asking himself a question that had no words. His next labor took him to the land of the Amazons, fierce warrior women ruled by Queen Hippolyta. He was sent to steal her sacred belt, a symbol of power given by the god Ares. At first, Hippolyta welcomed him, sensing his burden and strength. There was no battle, only quiet understanding between two warriors shaped by pain. But the gods are rarely satisfied with peace. Hera, jealous as ever, spread a lie among the Amazons that Hercules had come to kill their queen. Chaos erupted. In the confusion, Hippolyta was slain, not by Hercules' hand, but by the violence born of mistrust. He took the belt, but something inside him broke. What do you do when even your mercy leads to death? As the labors continued, they took him farther, not just across lands, but across moral lines. He was sent to steal the cattle of Geryon, a triple-bodied giant, and to capture the golden apples of the Hesperides, guarded by a serpent that never slept. Each challenge asked more than muscle, it asked for judgment, for sacrifice, for the steady unraveling of pride. But the most haunting of all came in his 11th task, to descend into the underworld itself, and return with Cerberus, the three-headed guard dog of the dead. This was not a metaphor. This was death. Hercules entered the realm of Hades, not with weapons, but with resolve. He faced ghosts, regrets, shadows of his past. He saw the souls of the damned, the weeping of the lost, and he walked among them not as a conqueror, but as one of them. There, in the silence of the underworld, he met the spirit of Megara, his wife, taken by his madness. She did not speak, but her eyes held no blame. Only sorrow. And then, a kind of peace. That moment broke him open, and remade him. He found Cerberus, did not harm the beast, but asked for permission to take him. With strength and grace, he led the guardian out of the darkness. Few trials could compare. For it was not the dog he wrestled, but death itself. And perhaps, forgiveness. Do you believe this myth still carries meaning in our modern world? Or is this story simply fantasy, or a mirror to something inside us all? When Hercules returned, Cerberus by his side, the final labor was declared complete. He was free. And yet, he did not feel free. The labors were over, but the burden remained. What does it mean to be redeemed, if the past still lives inside you? Hercules would soon find the answer, not in glory, but in sacrifice. The world called him a hero now. His name had become legend. His strength was unmatched, his labors complete. Kings bowed to him, poets praised him, and his image was carved into temples of marble and gold. But Hercules felt no triumph. The weight of the past still clung to him like a shadow. No applause could quiet the memories. He had become stronger, wiser, even gentler. And yet, inside, a quiet ache remained, a longing not to be celebrated, but to be healed. He wandered once more, this time not in service to any king, but to find peace. It was during these later years that he met Deianira, a woman of calm grace and fierce loyalty. He married her, hoping at last to begin again. But fate, it seems, does not forget. As they traveled together, they came to a river guarded by a centaur named Nessus. He offered to carry Deianira across, but as Hercules turned his back, the centaur tried to abduct her. Hercules reacted without pause, firing an arrow poisoned with the blood of the Hydra. Nessus fell. But with his dying breath, he whispered a lie to Deianira. He told her that his blood, if ever used on a garment, would ensure Hercules' love would never fade. Later, fearing her husband's affection might wander, Deianira gave him a tunic soaked in that poisoned blood. She meant no harm, only to keep his love. But love, when twisted by fear, becomes something darker. When Hercules put on the garment, the poison burned into his skin, seeping into his veins. It was agony beyond measure. Not a wound to fight, but a fire that no strength could overcome. He screamed. He tore at his skin. He begged for relief, but none came. And in that unbearable moment, something inside him broke, not in defeat, but in understanding. This was not the cruelty of gods or the madness of Hera. This was love, distorted by pain. Trust, broken by fear. And in that moment, Hercules made a choice. He climbed Mount Ida, slowly, painfully, every step a farewell. There, at the summit, he built a funeral pyre. He laid himself upon it, surrounded not by enemies, but by silence. He called upon his friend, Philoctetes, to light the fire. Flames rose. Smoke curled toward the sky. And the man who had wrestled death now embraced it. But this was not an ending. In Greek belief, some souls ascend, not to vanish, but to become divine. And so it was said, as his body turned to ash, Zeus lifted Hercules to Olympus, granting him immortality. No longer half god, half man, now fully God, and fully at peace. This moment, not a battle, not a labor, was the true climax. For it was here that Hercules transcended his suffering, not by conquering it, but by surrendering to what he had become. He chose dignity over rage, sacrifice over survival. It was not strength that defined him in the end, but the courage to let go. If you could ask Hercules one question, what would it be? Would you ask him how he endured? Or why he never gave up? Or perhaps, whether the fire freed him? As the flames died down, what rose from the ashes was no longer a warrior, but a symbol. One that would live on, long after gods and kings were forgotten. Hercules died. But his name did not. Across the lands of Greece and beyond, his story spread like wind through olive trees. From dusty villages to shining temples, his legend passed from voice to voice, not only for what he did, but for what he became. After his death, Zeus welcomed him to Olympus. The other gods, even Hera, laid down their grudges. It was said that she at last embraced him as a son, acknowledging not just his strength, but his perseverance. On the divine mount, Hercules found something he had never fully known in life: belonging. Yet even among the gods, he remained close to mortals. He was given a place in the stars, the constellation Hercules, a permanent light in the night sky, so that those below could look up and remember that even the most painful path can end in peace. But his legacy did not lie in the heavens alone. It was in how people remembered him, not just as the man who killed monsters, but as the man who carried his own suffering without turning it into hatred. As the man who lost everything, and still chose to try again. He became a symbol of resilience, of atonement, of human strength stretched to its breaking point, and then remade in humility. In times of war, generals would invoke his name. In times of hardship, storytellers would recall his trials. Even centuries later, artists would paint his image, not as a brute, but as a man torn between earth and Olympus, burdened yet beautiful. And beyond Greece, his story traveled. Rome adopted him, renaming him Hercules, and honored him as a god of strength and protection. In the Renaissance, he reemerged as a symbol of human potential, the idea that greatness is forged through suffering, not born from comfort. In modern times, his myth continues to live in books, films, poems, and symbols of endurance. Because in Hercules, we do not just see a hero. We see ourselves, struggling to overcome guilt, to rise after failure, to believe that redemption is possible even when the past seems too heavy. And so, his legacy is not carved only in stone, or written only in myth. It lives in the quiet choice to keep going. In the broken man who still seeks healing. In the truth that even gods must fall before they rise. Yet behind all the battles and divine honors lies something deeper, a lesson hidden within the fire and dust. What, truly, does Hercules teach us about life, about pain, and about the possibility of transformation? That answer awaits, not in the stars, but in the heart. What do we truly learn from Hercules? At first glance, his story seems filled with chaos, gods, monsters, punishments, impossible feats. But underneath the noise, there is something deeply human. A quiet rhythm of fall and rise, of brokenness transformed into meaning. Hercules teaches us that pain does not disqualify us from greatness. In fact, it is often through suffering that we find the path to something deeper. He was not born flawless. He was not gentle or wise at the beginning. His strength was a gift, but his redemption was earned. We often imagine heroes as perfect. But Hercules reminds us, true heroes are those who confront their own darkness. He made terrible mistakes, ones he could never undo. And yet, he chose not to run from them. He carried his guilt, and through each labor, he purified not only his name, but his spirit. Each monster was a metaphor. The Hydra, a symbol of pain that grows when we try to bury it. The stables, a symbol of inner pollution that must be faced and cleansed. Cerberus, the fear of death and the shadows of our past. These were not just tasks. They were mirrors. In his final act, climbing the mountain, laying himself on the pyre, Hercules teaches us the power of surrender. Not weakness, but the strength to accept what we cannot control, and the courage to let go. And perhaps this is the deepest truth of the myth, that strength alone cannot save us. It is the will to transform, to take responsibility, to endure the fire, and rise from it, that makes someone divine. Even today, when we face trials that feel impossible, we can look to Hercules. Not as a god, but as a guide. What deeper message or truth do you see in this myth? As the dust of time settles, and the stars continue to shine, Hercules remains not just a figure from ancient tales, but a symbol of the human journey. One where pain does not erase us. One where we rise, again and again. Dear listeners, today we walked through fire, not of fantasy, but of transformation. The tale of Hercules is not just an ancient story. It is a quiet echo of our own lives, of guilt, of hope, of the strength it takes not just to fight monsters, but to forgive ourselves. He was a hero, yes, but not because he never fell. He was a hero because, every time he fell, he chose to rise. And perhaps that is what we must all do. The story of Hercules reminds us that we are more than our mistakes. That redemption is not given, it is chosen. That every labor we endure, every trial we carry, can become a step toward healing. Toward peace. Toward something greater than pain. This legend may be ancient, but its message lives on, that courage without compassion is hollow, and that true greatness is forged not in glory, but in fire. So as you leave this tale behind, take a moment to reflect. Which part of this story stayed with you the most, and why? Do you feel this ancient legend speaks to your life in some way? If this story moved you, consider sharing it, pass the legend on. And don't forget to subscribe to WSE Legendary Lives, where each myth is more than just a story, it is a door into the soul of humanity. Thank you for walking with us today. Until next time, May your heart stay open and your spirit curious. And if ever you find yourself in darkness, look up. Hercules is still there, watching from the stars.